Suzerainty from Wikipedia. Suzerainty is any relationship in which one region or polity controls the foreign policy and the relations of a tributary state while allowing the tributary state to have internal autonomy. Suzerainty differs from true sovereignty in that though the tributary state or person is technically independent and enjoys self-rule, in practice, this self-rule is limited. Although the situation has existed in a number of historical empires, it is considered difficult to reconcile with the 20th or 21st century concepts of international law, in which sovereignty either exists or does not. While a sovereign state can agree by treaty to become a protectorate for a stronger power, modern international law does not recognize any way of making this relationship compulsory on the weaker power. Suzerainty is a practical, de facto situation rather than a legal de jure one. So exists in different historical settings in Imperial China, in ancient Israel, in Near East, and in the subcontinent, Pakistan, South African Republic, Second World War, German Empire, United States, historical, and other historical suzerainties. So only pick a few that we are interested with. In case of Imperial China, historically, the Emperor China saw himself as the center of the entire civilized world, and the diplomatic relations with China was based on the theory that all rulers of the world derive their authority from the emperor. The degree to which this authority in fact exists changed from dynasty to dynasty. However, even during periods when political power was distributed evenly across several political entities, Chinese political theory recognized only one emperor and asserted that his authority was paramount throughout the world. Diplomatic relations with the Chinese emperor was made on the theory of tributary states, although tributary relations in practice would often result in a formal trade on the theory that the emperor, in his kindness, would reward the tributary state with gifts of equal or greater value. This system broken down in the 18th and 19th centuries in two ways. First, during the 17th century, China was ruled by the ethnical Manchu-Qing dynasty, which ruled a multi-ethnic empire and justified the rule through different theories of rulership. While not contradicting traditional Han Chinese theories of the emperor as a universal ruler, the Qing made a distinction between areas of the world that they ruled and areas that they did not. Second, the system further broken down, and China was confronted by European powers, whose theories of sovereignty was based on their own version of international law and relations between several states. Unequal treaties. A series of unequal treaties, including among others, the Treaty of Nanjing, 1842, the treaties of Tianjin, 1858, and the Beijing Conventions, 1860, forced China to open new ports, including Canton, Amoy, and Shanghai. These treaties allowed the British to set up their own colony at Hong Kong and establish international settlements in those ports that were controlled by foreigners. They also required China to permanently accept diplomats, and Peking provided for free movement for foreign ships in Chinese rivers, imposed European regulations of Chinese tariffs, and opened the interior to Christian missionaries. Since the 1920s, The unequal treaties have been a centerpiece for Chinese grievances against the West. For a century, China has claimed suzerain authority over numerous adjacent areas. The areas had internal autonomy, but were theoretically under the protection of China in terms of foreign affairs. By the 19th century, the relationships were nominal, and China exerted little or no actual control. The Western powers rejected the concept and one by one seized these areas. Japan took Korean and Ryukyu Island, France took Vietnam, and Britain took Upper Burma. One way European states attempted to describe the relationship between the Qing dynasty and its outlying regions were in terms of suzerainty, although this did not completely match the traditional Chinese diplomatic theory. Since the Great Game, the British Empire had regarded strategic Tibet as under Chinese suzerainty. But in 2008, British Foreign Secretary David Miliband, in a statement called that word an anachronism, and joined the rest of the European Union and the United States in recognizing Tibet as a part of China. Ancient Israel and Near East. Suzerainty treaties and similar covenants and agreements between Middle Eastern states were quite prevalent during the pre-monarchic and monarchy period in ancient Israel. The Hittites, Egyptians, and the Syrians had been suzerains to the Israelites and other tribal kingdoms of the Levant from 1200 to 600 BC. The structure for Jewish covenant law was similar to the Hittite form of suzerainty. Each treaty would typically begin with an identification of the suzerain, followed by a historical prologue, cataloging the relationship between the two groups, with emphasis on the benevolent actions of the suzerain towards the vassal. Following the historical prologue came the stipulation. This include tributes, obligations, and other forms of subordination that would be imposed on the Israelites. According to the Hittite form, after the stipulations were offered to the vassal, it was necessary to include to do this as well. Okay. It was necessary to include a request to have copies of the treaty that would be read throughout the kingdom periodically. The treaty would have divine and earthly witnesses purporting the treaty's validity, trustworthiness, and efficacy. This also tied into the blessings that would come from following the treaty and the curses from breaching it. For disobedience, curses would be given to those who have not remained steadfast in carrying out the stipulations of the treaty. Hittite suzerainty treaty form. Below is a form of a Hittite suzerainty treaty. Preamble. Identify the parties involved in the treaty, the author, the title of the sovereign party, usually its genealogy. It usually emphasizes the greatness of the king or dominant party. Prologue. Lists of the deeds already performed by the suzerain on behalf of the vassal. This section would outline the previous relationship the two groups had up until that point with historical detail. And excuse me, let me come back to this. And the facts. that were beneficial to scholars today, such as the scholar George Mendenhall, who focuses on this type of covenant as it pertained to the Israelite traditions. Suzerainty would document previous events in which the favor that benefited the vassal. The purpose of this would show that the more powerful group was merciful and giving, therefore the vassal should obey the stipulations that are presented in the treaty. It discusses the relationship between them as a personal relationship instead of a solely political one. Most importantly, in this section, the vassal is agreeing to future obedience for the benefits that he received in the past without deserving them. Stipulations, terms to be upheld by the vassal for the life of the treaty, defines how the vassal is obligated and gives more of the legalities associated with the covenant. Provision for annual public reading. Copula for the treaty was to be read aloud annually in the vassal state for the purpose of renewal and to inform the public of the expectations involved and increase respect for the sovereign party, usually the king. Divine witness to the treaty. This usually includes the deities of both the suzerain and the vassal, but to put a special emphasis on the deities of the vassal. Blessings if the stipulations of the treaty are upheld, and curses if the stipulations are not upheld. These blessing curses were generally seen to come from the gods instead of punishment by the dominant party. For example, sacrificial meal, both parties would share a meal to show their participation in the treaty. Very interesting. Okay, I'm going to read the Indian subcontinent as well. British paramountcy. The British East India Company conquered Bengal in 1757 and gradually extended its control over the whole of India. It annexed many of the erstwhile Indian kingdoms, the hereafter states, but entered into alliances with the others. Some states were created by the East India Company itself through the grant for Jangars to influential allies. The states varied enormously in size and influence, with Hyderabad and the upper end with 16.5 million people and annual revenue for 100 million rupees, and the states like Barbara and the lower end with a population for 27 people and annual revenue for 80 rupees. These states were subject to the paramountcy of the British Crown. The term was never precisely defined, but it meant that the Indian states were subject to the suzerainty of the British Crown, exercised through the Viceroy of India. The principle was asserted in the letter by Lord Reading to the Nizam for Hyderabad in 1926. The sovereignty of the British Crown is supreme in India, and therefore no ruler of an Indian state can justifiably claim to negotiate with the British government on an equal footing. This meant that the Indian states were dependencies or protectorates of the British Indian government. They could only economic war or have any direct dealings with the foreign states. Neither did they enjoy full internal autonomy. The British government could indeed interfere in their internal affairs if the imperial interests were involved or if it proved necessary in the interest of good governance. In some cases, the British government also deposed the Indian princes. Scholars hold that the system of paramountcy was a system for limited sovereignty only in appearance. In the reality, it was a system for recruitment of a reliable base of support for the imperial state. The support of the imperial state obliterated the need for the rulers to seek legitimacy through patronage and dialogue with their populations, through the direct as well as indirect rule through the princes. The colonial state turned the population Indian into subjects rather than citizens. The Government of India Act of 1935 envisaged that India would be a federation of autonomous provinces balanced by Indian princely states. However, this plan never came to fruition. The political conditions were oppressive in several princely states, giving rise to political movements. Under pressure from Gandhi, the Indian National Congress resolved not to interfere directly, but called on the princes to increase civil liberties and reduce their own privileges. With the impending independence of India in 1947, the Viceroy, Lord Mountbatten, announced that the British paramountcy over the Indian states would come to an end. The states were advised to accede to one of the new dominions, India and Pakistan. Instead, an instrument for accession was devised for this purpose. The Congress leaders agreed to the plan with the condition that Mountbatten ensure that the majority of the states within the Indian territory accede to India. Under pressure from the Viceroy, all the Indian states acceded to the Indian save two, Chandigarh and Hyderabad. The two states acceded later under coercion from India. Jammu and Kashmir, which shared the border with India as Pakistan, acceded to India when the Pakistan-backed invasion threatens its survival. Sikkim, following India's independence in 1947, a treaty signed between the Choyong, Paudem Thodup, Namgyal, and the Indian Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru, giving Indian suzerainty over Sikkim in exchange for its retaining its independence. This continued until 1975, when the Sikkimese monarchy was abolished in fear of a merger into India. Sikkim is now one of the states of India, like a Shawadip. I'm not going to read on that one anymore. Let's see what happened in Pakistan. Not really needed. Let's see what happened to South African Republic. After the First Boer War, that is 1880 to 81, the South African Republic was granted independence, albeit under British suzerainty. During the Second Boer War, 1899 to 1802, the South African Republic was annexed and as the colony of the Transvaal, which existed until 1910, when it became the province of Transvaal in the Union for South Africa. Second World War, we don't need to worry about this. So let's see. Okay, there are also some form existing in German Empire. Let's see what happened in the United States. Okay. When applied to the United States, the concept of suzerainty also includes the evolving relations between the federal government, state governments, and the Indian tribes. Article 1, Section 8 of the United States Constitution states that Congress shall have the power to regulate commerce with the foreign nations and among the several states and with the Indian tribes, and lists the four since the United States Supreme Court decisions having provided guidelines in how to interpret the constitutional provisions. Johnson versus M. Estache, 1823. In Johnson versus M. Estache, 21 U.S. 8 weight 543, 1823. The court applied the rule of conquest and subsequent division that was accepted by the nations of Europe at the time. That title properly belonged to the nation which discovered or conquered and had dominion over the new land. This meant that there was a diminishment of the natives' ability to dispose of their land. Natives could live on the land, but then they could not grant the land to a private individual. According to the treaty ending the Revolutionary War, the 1783 Treaty of Paris, Great Britain relinquished any claim to proprietary and territorial rights of the United States. Thus, the United States owned the entirety of the land, which were situated within the boundaries of the states existing at that time, and those natives who lived within such boundaries did not own title to the land. At the end of the Revolutionary War, the land of the United States were east of the Mississippi River, excluding the area around New Orleans. Cherokee Nation versus Georgia, 1831. In the Cherokee Nation versus Georgia, 30 U.S. 1, 1831, it was observed that the acts of the United States government plainly recognized the Cherokee Nation as a state. Numerous treaties made with the tribe by the United States recognize them as a people capable of maintaining the relations of peace and war. Therefore, the courts were bound by those acts. It was concluded that the tribe's relation to the United States resembled that of a ward to his guardian, and were a dominated domestic dependent nation and not a foreign nation. Worcester versus Georgia, 1832. In Worcester versus Georgia, 31 U.S. 8 P.E.T. I don't know what that is. Anyway, 5/15, 1832. It was affirmed that the federal government inherited the rights of Great Britain as they were held by that nation. It was acknowledged that the exercise of conquest and purchase can give political dominion, but those are in the hands of the federal government and not the states. Specifically, the court ruled that the Cherokee Nation was a distinct community with a self-government in which the laws of Georgia have no force. This case established the doctrine that it's the national government of the United States and not individual states had the authority in Indian affairs. The United States was Kingama, 1886. Indian territory was reduced to the approximate boundaries of the current state of Oklahoma by the Kansas-Nebraska Act of 1854. During the American Civil War, several Indian tribes signed treaties with the Confederacy, and the conclusion of the war, the U.S. government and tribes signed new reconstruction treaties, and the government changed their policy from Indian removal to assimilation. The Indian Preparations Act of 1871 and two significant sections. First, the act required the federal government no longer interact with the various tribes through treaties, but rather through statutes by stating in part, no Indian nation or tribe within the territory of the United States shall be acknowledged or recognized as an independent nation. The 1871 Act also made it a federal crime to commit murder, manslaughter, rape, assault with intent to kill, arson, burglary, and larceny within any territory of the United States. The 1871 Act was affirmed in 1886 by the U.S. Supreme Court in United States versus Kingama, 118 U.S. 375, 1886, which affirmed that the Congress had plenary power over all American Indian tribes within its borders by rationalization that the powers of general government over this remnant of race, once powerful, is necessary to their protection as well as to the safety of those among whom they dwell. Before 1871, the United States had recognized the Indian tribes as semi-independent. The Supreme Court affirmed that the U.S. government has the right and authority, instead of controlling them by treaties, to govern them by acts of Congress. Their being within the geographical limit of the United States, Indians own no allegiance to a state within which the reservation may be established, and the state gives them no protection. There's many others of in the historical suzerainties in the listing. We will not read on that.